Hey everyone, welcome back to the Run for Ben podcast. Today we're doing something a little different. This is a special interview episode. In fact, it's a part one of our two-part series of a conversation with our guest, Josh Ansley. Josh is the voice behind the band Least of Thieves. That band created our wonderful theme song, This Is It, the song that you hear at the beginning of every episode of the podcast. We're so grateful he could join us today. Beyond that, Josh also has young onset Parkinson's disease, and we have a very frank conversation where we talk about his music, the diagnosis, and how he copes with things. And we even get into sobriety and other topics that are very interesting and relevant to this Run for Ben documentary series that we're doing. And a quick note about that conversation. It does tend to get a little heavy at times. So if you are going through something similar or emotional conversations are a bit much, you just may want to have some discretion. I do encourage you to listen. There's a lot of incredible things to learn from this episode. And another programming note, the audio is not sterling for Josh. His connection we did have some issues with, but the conversation was so worth it. So it's minor stuff, but just wanted to mention it. So please enjoy. This is part one of our interview with Josh Ansley. Let's go.
Okay, everybody, welcome to the Run for Ben podcast. My name is Jamin Spitzer. Here with me is the director, Mike Picarillo, and today is a special podcast of Run for Ben. We're not going to be talking about a documentary episode this time. We're actually going to be talking to a special guest who is part of the documentary. If you've heard the intro for the documentary, you will have heard this person that we're having on here today. His name is Josh Ansley, and we're excited to have him on here. We'll talk about this. And Josh also was diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's disease. We're going to talk about a lot of different things, but that's the intro. Welcome to the podcast, Josh.
Thank you so much. It's awesome to be here. It's awesome to be a part of it too, with the music and everything. It's been really cool.
It's been great having somebody who is part of the podcast, doing the music, who understands this as well. When Mike talked to me about you doing the music for this, and then having young onset Parkinson's disease, it was, a no-brainer to have you on, and we're really honored to have you to do the music for that and to open up. It's special every time that we have that, and I think people hearing that and understanding that that will be, an interesting thing for them as well. But Mike, I know you've had a bigger history with Josh, so I want to throw it over right now to the director, Mr. Mike Picarillo.
Hi there. I was very excited to, when we were getting the podcast up and running, to have Josh's music be a part of it. And we worked together. We did a web series. I think it's been about 15 years ago, in 2011, called Strapped, which good luck finding it anywhere, but it was a fun experience. We had a blast together. And after that went our separate ways and reconnected. Josh, I'm going to speak for him. He could correct me when I'm wrong. I think he'd been following kind of what I'd been posting on socials about Run for Ben and all that stuff. And of course, when he had his diagnosis, he had reached out just to say, hey, this is what's going on with me. And it was a really awesome opportunity to connect with him again and kind of get caught up and hear his story. And I've always had him in my mind, especially once we were developing the podcast, because we wanted a really banging intro to the podcast. So that was an awesome opportunity to do that.
Josh, I would like to hear a little bit from you. There is in getting to know you, virtually here, you do quite a few different things. Musician, obviously, if you see the background there, there's a good bunch of guitars, basses, mandolins up there. You've been an actor. You have done quite a few things. So instead of me going over them, can you tell us a little bit about, who you are, background, anything else that you find interesting, or we will?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I still don't know who I am, Jamin. I'm still looking. It's funny. The song is called "This Is It" that we used for the podcast, and it's such an incredible honor to be a part of this. And I love that it's woven in, with me having young onset Parkinson's disease, and like just that the music is, the song itself is called "This Is It," and it's what if this is all that there is. And I wrote the song before I was diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's disease, but the lyrics are very much about like living in this moment and what if this is all that there is. And in my sobriety of 11 years, which is a huge part of my life, it's one day at a time. And I've known that axiom and tried to live by that axiom for a long time, but Parkinson's has exacerbated that in my life, or accentuated. I don't need to say exacerbated, it's accentuated that in my life, to be living one day at a time and in this moment, which is such a challenge. But yeah, that being said, I think that I've been all over the map as an actor. Went to school at Mason Grove School of the Arts at Rutgers University as an actor, and got into directing and writing. And then it was always music, and it was always music versus writing and directing and stuff like that. And I had some success with the music world. I was early on, from the age of 18, was a bass player for the band Streetlight Manifesto, Catch 22. Actually, first it was Catch 22, and then we formed, as members of that band, formed Streetlight Manifesto on Victory Records, and that had its own big underground sort of following and stuff, and still has today. And then joined a band called Hurt, and we toured with Alice in Chains and Stained and 3 Days Grace, Breaking Benjamin, that kind of stuff on Capitol Records, and that was an amazing experience, very different world of music and stuff. But I was always kind of like going back to the storytelling and going, I always felt like being a bass player in someone else's band was like sort of like being a general on someone else's battlefield, or a sergeant on someone else's battlefield instead of a general on my own. And I didn't feel like I was really living my purpose. And so now I have the project Least of Thieves, which is what This Is It, the song that is for this podcast and stuff. And so it's always kind of been between the two of the storytelling. And I was always leaving music to go back to, or the storytelling aspect of things. And there's been a wide range of experience going through, studying in London at the Globe and living in Mexico for a year and coming back and finding myself in recovery from alcoholism, drug addiction, mental health issues, childhood trauma, under-earning, codependency, all kinds of things. And now, in addition to that, young onset Parkinson's disease. So through all of that, I found, myself as a spiritual being through this whole journey for a long time now. And what I actually do now is I'm a spiritual advisor in dual diagnosis, addiction and recovery, mental health recovery. And so it's been a really rewarding life. So be doing that while playing the music and doing my own music with Least of Thieves has been pretty powerful. It's also been pretty intense, being that, of all the things that the symptoms that I'm having for the last 2 years, I was diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's disease about 2 years ago. That the biggest thing is actually losing my ability to play guitar, which is, of all the things, it's kind of, at this point in my life, it's kind of like just discomfort. So it's manageable, except for the fact that I'm losing my ability to play guitar is a big hit. So it's a lot of radical acceptance and things like that in my life. But
what is the specifically the discomfort, and when did you kind of start noticing it? How did that go about?
The discomfort, I'm feeling. Just going to throw this out there as we talk about authenticity and discomfort. So it's kind of funny that you're saying this because we're talking about physical discomfort of the Parkinson's, but I'm also feeling. Right now, I'm feeling quite emotional. I think there's something about. I just don't want to jump in. I'll answer that too, but it's all the discomfort. It's all this discomfort. When Mike was posting exactly like he'd said, and I'd seen things that were happening with the documentary that he was doing with you and your father, it really hit me. It really hit me hard, and I reached out to him, and some of it was, I don't want to say too much, but it seems like it's out there in the open anyway. But when your father passed, that post really hit me because I was really struggling with trying to understand what the heck was happening with me. It was very early on. And I kept hearing things like, you don't pass from Parkinson's, you pass from complications due to Parkinson's. And I was like, what does that mean? And they were saying things like, if you've seen one person with Parkinson's, you've seen one person with Parkinson's, which essentially means you don't know what the progression is going to look like. And people are like, I had a friend who was, lived with it for 30 years and just had a tremor. And then there was like, or 7 years from now, my stomach could stop digesting food and I could pass. And like, that was the thing that really hit me. And I don't know all the details, but when I read that in the post, I was just absolutely floored. And it's been, speaking about the discomfort now. So my physical discomfort is mostly a tremor and muscular. I always get confused with the word. It's not dystonia yet. There's some bradykinesia, which is like slow movement. Dyskinesia, there's tremor. The tremor is somewhat new. The first thing that happened, I was in a guitar lesson, and I just noticed I noticed the only way I can describe it is like a queasiness in my left forearm, which is a weird way to describe it, but it was, I'm very aware of my body as a musician and as a yoga teacher for, over a decade, and a practitioner of yoga for over 20 years. It was a very subtle thing that I was like, what was that? It was just kind of like a queasiness in my left forearm, and it was not exactly doing what I wanted it to do, but it was still very subtle. And slowly I started to have my left arm just kind of holding up along my side. And it was, me and my fiance were joking about it. It was like, what is that? That's weird. Like, put it down. Like, before we knew anything. And I was like, I don't know. It just seemed so strange. I had no idea about the, multiple symptoms of Parkinson's. Most things that we talk about, we know from, like, we usually think of it as a tremor. And there's many things, right? Like, when I got into understanding the, like, freezing, the weird stuff, like freezing in doorways, like, what are you even talking about? Like, it's this weird physical, sociological, psychological things that are happening, that can happen, and like acting out your dreams at night. And, I have no sense of smell, just like weird, just random weird things. And the flat affect, of your face. And when I first went to one of the first neurologists, it was not a movement specialist, but she was like, oh, I can tell you had Parkinson's just when you walked in by the look on your face. And I was like, what? You can tell by the look on my face? And here I thought it was actually, my stoic nature was actually all the self-work I've been doing in recovery for a decade. And it turns out it's just freaking Parkinson's. But so on a basis right now, the discomfort physically is tremor and muscle spasms and things like that. And the big issue for me now that I want to talk about, that I think is overlooked a lot in Parkinson's, is the anxiety and depression and things like that, and the psychological factors of it. And it's quite confusing. Last year, I ended up in the psych ward for a week, which is very humbling, being that I work in the field and I've had, at that point, almost 11 years sober. And I was like, I lead groups on these things. And, it was just a little bit more humility. But it was very, first of all, finding words is actually one of the issues in cognitive things. So I'm very nervous about not being able to speak, which I actually think I'm doing a fantastic job. So good job, Josh.
Absolutely.
I'm just going and not stopping. But a lot of times I do stumble over words now, which is, another humbling thing. But the major thing that I wanted to discuss was the fact of, like, it's hard to discern the emotional anxiety versus the actual diagnosable Parkinson's anxiety from the chemical response. And so those are treated differently. So last year I was having a tremendous amount of anxiety. I mean, there's from the diagnosis itself, like, just how am I going to support my family? What's going to happen in the unknown? We just bought a house, and it's my first house, and I started to have thoughts that it was basically a passive suicidal ideation in terms of, it was more the thoughts of like, oh, if I got hit by a car, I'm worth more dead than I am alive because of the life insurance and things like that. And so it became very overwhelming. And that's all emotional stuff that would be treated medication wise one way. But we decided to try and treat it from the Parkinson's chemical aspect with a particular medication. And that sent me off the deep end, and I wound up in the psych ward for a week and out of work for 2 months or so and stuff. And so it's a hard discernment to actually recognize what's the physical aspect of the tremor causes me emotional anxiety, and that causes more of a tremor, and it's a cyclical thing. And where do you start it, the treatment for it, or the Parkinson's, the physical Parkinson's symptoms, trigger the anxiety, or the anxiety triggers the Parkinson's. And so it's been a journey over the last 2 years already, even. Sorry, that was a lot.
No, you don't need to apologize at all. The deep breath on me is my, as you mentioned, and will be shown in the documentary and podcast, my dad passed on July 20th of 2024, and all those things that you mentioned, the progression as it differs, if you've met one person with Parkinson's, you met one person, at first that made, little sense until I engaged more with the community as I went, it was working with this documentary with my dad. I started to learn more because there was so little that we knew. My dad is the first person who was diagnosed with Parkinson's in our family. So I had no knowledge other than the same thing that you had mentioned. I knew that there was shaking. I didn't even, know that it was specifically called tremors. I had just seen, Muhammad Ali and Michael J. Fox, and there was some shaking involved. But beyond that, I had no idea of what to expect. And then in learning more, there is some ideas of what will be coming, but how that differs as we saw different people. Some people, like you had said, had it for 20, 30 years and didn't have as many symptoms as my dad did within a couple of years, and that was difficult for him to deal with too. And like you had said, one of the things that he first picked up was the depression piece of it, and the anxiety, and also the stiff gait. His started in his left foot, and it looked like a little bit of a limp, like he was dragging his foot. And that was, my cousin actually mentioned that and said, well, why are you walking like that, Dad? You're walking like an old man. She picked it up like jokingly, but that was just one of the clues. And then the other was, he was such an incredibly positive person and always joking, full of humor, and had not dealt with any real depression or anxiety. So as that came up, he took it, that what was going on in his life, because he was unaware of the Parkinson's. He had not been diagnosed yet. So he was trying to struggle to find what was happening with himself. Why was he feeling like this? Why were his dreams so vivid? Why was he feeling like this when he would go to sleep, And so it makes me recall all of those things, because we were so close that I would hear about these from my mom or from him directly. And because of the documentary, it really did force me to start asking some questions. I guess it didn't force me, but as a part of this, one of the things that you had talked about too, that I relate to, is sobriety. I got sober May 3rd, 2019.
Congratulations,
when
brother.
I was in Los Angeles, California. And so I'm coming up on, 7 years in a month, God willing. And what I learned from getting sober, exactly, best thing that ever happened.
Amen.
But what I learned from getting sober was to reach out for help, because I had not done that before. I would probably counsel people and tell people that I would be there for them, but I myself would not reach out, and with sobriety is the first time I had no more answers, and I asked for help out of desperation, and help was there. And then I learned more about being honest and open and vulnerable. And I went, hey, you know what? I really want to connect with my dad. I don't know what this, disease is going to do, what the progression is, but I don't know how much time we have. And I really want to talk about these things because they're uncomfortable and I don't know what to do. And so picking up the camera and starting to talk about it was kind of the first steps to getting that going. It got more in depth as I got going, and I learned more about it. And I'm still no, professional about the medical side of it. What I really lean into and what the documentary is really about, and I was talking with, I go to therapy as well as, sobriety, and do all the things. But I was talking to her about the reality of it is that hopefully somebody sees this who feels alone, who's not sure where to go or where to turn, whether it be somebody with Parkinson's, but also the family, the caregivers, the people who care about that person who may not know where to go or where to turn, that they won't feel so alone. So our story is more about exactly what you're talking about, not just here's what Parkinson's is, this is what it does, but all of these other things that maybe are not taken into account, the small things that really are very impactful for a life. And you don't see that in all the time from the outside. Certainly we didn't see it until you start experiencing it. And I hope that this, and especially certainly having you on here and talking about this, has already started to impact me, just of understanding what you're talking about, and that we're not alone in this, not in our sobriety, not in our, the Parkinson's, not in our humanity. We're connected. And as Brene Brown says, which was the book that kind of prompted me to pick up a camera, Daring Greatly, is that we are wired for connection. Sometimes I don't want that. I'd like to just be on an island and nothing affects me and nothing touches me. But of course, ultimately, connection is incredibly beautiful when we let it in, but for me, was not easy.
But it's inherently not easy, I think. I just want to say that if this ended right now and you guys did nothing more following this moment, you've already helped someone. You've helped me.
That's awesome, dude. Thank you.
And I mean that very sincerely. Just to be here right now and to have seen those posts, and particularly the post about your father, and it brought me into more discomfort, which brought me into a place of learning and growing about what's happening and the possibilities, and to acceptance. And I'm not in an acceptance. I'm working on it. I actually realized that I was confusing radical acceptance with future tripping. What I mean by that is, radical acceptance is radically accepting the facts of whatever is actually happening, right? The exact nature of what is happening. But I was making it, I had to accept the possibility of what could happen. And I don't know what's going to happen. So I was just playing God in that space of thinking that I know what's going to happen, and so there's a lot of growth in actually seeing. We went to the first Parkinson's walk we went to that September. So September of 24. This is actually some of the most painful stuff. And I talked to my fiance about it, and I asked her if it was okay to share. When I first got diagnosed, I was told not to really do too much research on things. because it would just be a spiral. And the first time I ever looked anything up, I was spiraling out when I was still, it's a wait for it, it's coming, clinical diagnosis. So there's not actually really a specific test that can be done and things. And part of the diagnostic process is taking carbidopa-levodopa, which is the medication that if it works, and there's some aspects of it that you could have Parkinson's and not respond well to the medication. But if it responds well, if the symptoms are abated from the medication, it's basically an indication that you have Parkinson's. And they were starting to work, which was great because it was a bit of a relief from the symptoms, but it was also like this devastating thing that I was like, oh my God, I have Parkinson's. And the first day I looked something up, I definitely spiraled out. And I'm saying this because my fiance was doing all of the research at the time, so she could understand how to be my care partner and things like that. And so she was going down the Reddit black hole of places of seeing the people that were struggling, care partners that were struggling so much with the late stages of Parkinson's care and things like that. And we went to the Parkinson's walk, and it was the first time that I saw other people really with later stages of Parkinson's and things. And we wound up having a fight, which we don't fight that often. We have a really wonderful relationship. I must say it's absolutely incredible, actually. And it's beyond wonderful. But we had a fight, and that night she actually said to me that she wasn't sure that she could do it. And I was like, I can't believe that I just got diagnosed with Parkinson's disease and now my fiance is going to leave me. And I wound up going for a walk and talking to a mentor of mine, and he was like, if she decides to stay, she's in it for good. And I was like, I can't believe this is actually happening. Maybe I should be leaving her. I shouldn't even put her through this, and it's not fair of me, so I shouldn't even stay with her. And she was texting me like, please come back, please come back. And when I got back, she was like, I love you, I'm not going anywhere. And I could feel that it was actually very powerful because she was expressing her truth. She was struggling with how the devastating facts of what it could look like as well. And she's only a human being, an incredible human being, but she was struggling with that. And I love the fact that she was honest with me, because now I know that when she says it's otherwise, I believe and I know that to be true, because she was honest with me when it goes the other direction. And she has been absolutely incredibly supportive through this entire process. And that was, to her something or other, to her good something, to her can't find the word. Her mother got diagnosed with Parkinson's as well 6 months after I did. So she was just getting smacked left and right by it. And that was after this event that I was talking about was before her mother's diagnosis. But she was like, this is obviously a part of my life that I can't be running from, maybe we can run for, not run from. No, sorry. But yeah, so it's something that, and that's another thing to just be stated too, that it's it's now, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure absolutely right on the facts, but it's overtaken the number one spot of the fastest growing neurological disorder. If I'm not mistaken, that might be inaccurate in that entirely, but it's either the first or second fastest growing neurological disorder in the world. And it's like, it's biological or environmental factors and things like that. And, I've been reading the Parkinson's Plan, which is, this incredible book about, what to do about Parkinson's and where to go with it, and, with the entire treatment of it. And I haven't finished it yet, and I haven't gotten through the whole beginning of it. Is just the paraquat and the different chemicals that we're using that are, such factors in this that we don't even know and stuff like that. So that's a whole other aspect of things. But it's my fiance has been dealing with it from every angle. And so that was just sharing the difficulties that it brings to other people. Like you said, it's like alcoholism, drug addiction, how it affects the entire family, and it's a disease that affects everybody.
Man, yeah. I mean, as you talk, there's so much to relate to on everything that you talk about, and one of them is that caregiver aspect of things, and I think the documentary will show also my mom. They were married for 47 or 48 years. Prior to him being him diagnosed, 40 some years or whatever it was. And yeah, it was not easy all the time. And she was really the one who did the research. He took the route of more of like, okay, I'm going to stay positive. I'm going to keep moving. He always worked out. He did a lot of working out, lifting weights. Yeah. Yeah. It's so important. And he did rowing machine and jump ropes and stuff like this. And that's what he really leaned into. He also at the start, because of the diagnosis, being that it's not, tests are run and then it's like, oh, there it is. So there was also thought from another person who was more of a holistic healer that it may be a brain infection. So at first he was doing a lot of body work with this woman, and then a lot of a very particular diet at certain times, at certain things, and hoping that would be the thing. So he had a hope that hopefully it's this and that something else happened. So, and he leaned really heavily into that, going and getting, body work done from her, following the plan. And, that was the hope that maybe that was the case. It was Parkinson's. And so the coming to grips with that in like slower stages, and the way that Parkinson's kind of comes at, that came at my dad, is learning it along the way and not knowing exactly kind of this slow burn to final, diagnosis was a slow process, and one that he was trying to be very positive. My mom, once he had that, really leaned into the educational piece of that. And I, like my dad, more leaned into, just how can I be there for my dad? I'm not going to be a professional about this and know everything about it. I didn't go down that route myself. It was, what can I do right now? And this turned out to be that journey for me, but I'm so thankful that my mom was there to learn and to understand these things. Because oftentimes when they went to, appointments and things, my dad oftentimes she would say that he would try to downplay some things or not be as open, and she would mention, no, this is actually happening. Remember this, Ben, this is happening, And so she was able to understand more of what the doctors were saying and really understand and help him along for a lot of that process. And so as much as she does not have Parkinson's and did not, the effect that it had in being a person going through that and helping along the way, which will be very clear in the documentary, is it affects the entire family. And and this is part of, what we're talking about too, is there are, and I'm sure you've probably seen at this point, a lot of different people who are advocating, who have young onset Parkinson's, who have Parkinson's. There are wonderful groups doing very, very great work in that space. And Mike and I have talked about that this is less a space about education of, the medical side, though we will obviously talk about those things. It is more of what you're bringing also to this, which is the connection piece, the day-to-day life and the day-to-day, how do we show up for these things? What do we really go through on an emotional and personal relationship level? And hopefully, like you said, that it's impacted you. And the hope is that that impacts other people so that we show up, because that time, no matter what it is, whether we have, diagnosed with Parkinson's or we're just living and healthy right now, none of us are living forever. So this is going to affect all of us in some particular way. I was even talking with a friend a while back who was dealing with transitions with his father as he was getting older. His father does not have Parkinson's, but much of what he's had to go through and ways that he show up for dad are very similar, and we can talk about these things. So this is your honesty, this documentary's honesty, the ability to open that up is to hopefully, do exactly that, connect and make sure that not only the folks who are dealing with Parkinson's, but also those family members who are secondarily dealing with that, all feel like, what they're going through is valid, important, and it's okay. Because there were times when my mom was happy to show up. There were times when it was very difficult, like you said, like that real come to reality of like, can I do this as well? The direct connection that I had at the start was the Kurt Gibson Foundation for Parkinson's. And the reason that the connected was so well was, one, it was connected to the Detroit Marathon, and I was already, as part of my sobriety, the world shut down 10 months into my sobriety. So isolation and whatnot, I was like, this is not good. It was, so I immediately started running in the trails, and I was already trained up to a half marathon, which I did in celebration of my year of sobriety. Was go out in the morning, get a trail run in, some coffee. That's what I do now. Go out in the morning, enjoy a morning sunrise, then get a nice coffee and a pastry, and it's about as wild as I get. And then from there, I connected with Kurt Gibson Foundation because they had the marathon. But what they do now is they have a foundation that they've opened. So they've come such a long way from where they started. And also Kurt Gibson was a childhood hero from the Detroit Tigers. So we knew that very well. My dad and I were very into baseball. So it was an easy connection there. But his foundation is a place where people can come and do all of these workouts in one place, the folks with Parkinson's. But the thing that I saw when I visited there the other day too was the caregivers have groups. So the wives, the sons, the fathers, family members will come in, and then they will have a group of people. So this one woman came up to me and said she was aware of Run for Ben and was following stay there, and then talk with some of the other family members of these folks attending the classes. So it's this really beautiful support for all of the people who are affected by that. And it was incredible to see that, and really nice to still now, even though my father's passed, to be able to connect and to hopefully help some other people out with that.
Whatever it is that I want to accomplish or achieve or step into, it's not just about accomplishment and achievement, but whatever I want to step into, it's important for me to have somebody who is further down the line who has done that, to have a mentor. It's Rocky had Mickey, Luke had Obi-Wan. It's like, I need to have somebody that has gone down that path. And I've seen that in sobriety. Here's where I really started to see that. And then I've seen it in so many other areas. I do a lot of different work, my mental health, and I've done a lot of work with childhood trauma. And there's a lot of programs that I've gone to for childhood trauma and sex and love addiction, and the process of actually under-earning, and programs for under-earning, and turned my life around in that regard. And it was having other people who've been like, not to feel that finding out that I'm textbook is actually a very relieving thing. It's right. So it's not the terminally unique space. Of course we're all beautiful, unique flowers and snowflakes and stuff like that. But it's powerful to recognize that, like, oh, this is textbook. Like when my fiance sends me a reel about, a couple fighting about farting in bed. I'm like, all right, good. We're not the only ones. This is a thing that happens to everybody, right? And so it's good to know that we're not alone, and it's really powerful in that. So I've seen that. That's one thing I would definitely just put out there. I went to a rock steady boxing class, and I'm not still participating in that right now. I do a lot of different things, and I've started to do indoor rock climbing, and I'm exploring what is actually most beneficial for me. But one of the guys that was from the rock steady boxing class, we connected, and we still have that connection. And he was diagnosed a couple of years before I was, and it's important for me to have this community now, and in whatever little field that it is, whether it be sobriety or, like I said, in Parkinson's and things like that. It's essential. It's absolutely essential.
Mike has been along in his journey as well. I'm interested as we talk about these things. Is there something that pops up to you that you want to dig into a little bit more that jumps out at you? We all, I think, are approaching this from a little bit of a different angle. And I'm very interested to hear, your thoughts on some of these things as well, Mike, or any questions that you may have, because being in it sometimes that's one thing, but I'm interested to.
Yeah, no. It's funny I have, the story I know very well with Jamin, and then what I know somewhat of Josh and what I'm learning today. And it's like there's always been this kind of thesis that we've had while we were making this documentary about how finding good support and information is always a challenge. It's out there, sure, but it's never concrete or really just, because of what Parkinson's is. It's very kind of abstract, and everybody has a different go at it, has a different, experience with it. It affects them more, less, whatever. It's fascinating to see that. And I wonder, and knowing that you both obviously have sobriety in common, for Josh, I'd like to ask, kind of rolling back to kind of when that was more a thing, start with where you were at with sobriety. I'd like to hear how that kind of went for you and how that informed kind of your acceptance of Parkinson's. We got a taste of it, but I'd like to hear a little bit more about that if you'd be willing.
There was a point when I was living in Los Angeles where I broke up with the girl, quit my job, did some yoga teacher training, sold all my stuff, and moved to Mexico. Like you do, and it was this amazing thing that, like, I would, as a spiritual journey, some of the things that lined up, I would probably still do it again, though it was an insane choice. It wasn't just a manic running away. I don't know. There's a discernment of actually what is mania, and if diagnostically, if I'm still, like, I have obsessive compulsive disorder as a diagnosis, and that was very beneficial for me to actually find out. And that was only recently, last year, because it's not the trending sort of idea of like, oh, I'm obsessive compulsive, I have to clean everything. It's like a real destructive pattern of thinking and way of understanding that now when I can bring light to it, it can transform my life. And we can also bring medication to it, which can transform my life. But they're still not sure if there's, other diagnoses as well, like bipolar, things like that, because there's definitely like sort of a spiritual aspect to these things, and I'm not a religious man per se, but there's these connotations that it's an interesting pool of mess, right? And I didn't know there was childhood trauma, and it depends on which lens we look through these things. When I sold all my stuff and moved to Mexico, I was not drinking at the time, but I wasn't actually actively working a program of recovery. And I wound up getting into a relationship and discovered all this other new stuff, the issues that I had that I didn't know. And I wound up fleeing the country and moving back into my mother's house at 36 and starting from scratch and having absolutely nothing. And so it was a real adventure of what the heck is going on. And a lot of my issues were childhood things that all came back up because I was living with her. This is a lot, but the journey of, I didn't know that I was using anything to stay away from myself. We joked in the beginning, and I was saying I'm still finding out who I am, and it was a joke, but it's really not. I think that's the biggest question we can ask ourselves is who am I, and who am I really, other than these identities? The identity of being an artist used to be my deepest connection to my spiritual aspect of life and my purpose. And when I felt as a failure as an artist, I had to go to a deeper identity even than that, right? And it was powerful to realize that was just another identity, and there was something deeper inside of me than that. And so, it wasn't just the drinking and drugs, it was all sort of process-based addictions too. Anything that was actually, which can be even more difficult, like sex and love or something like that, that is, they say, messing with your own internal medicine cabinet, right? So my early recovery, I was absolutely insane for like several years. There was a time when I was living on a houseboat in the middle of winter on the East River and working in the Bronx and just trying to make things work. And some of the ideas and some of the striving to make everything happen was a lot of insanity happening, but I didn't know anything more. So it was a process of discovery of a lot of things in my life, and really recognizing that if I had gotten diagnosed with Young Onset Parkinson's disease earlier in my recovery, I don't know that I would have stayed sober, to be honest with you. Because when I got diagnosed, I was 10 years in and much more grounded in my recovery. I heard stories of like the 7 to 10 year mark can be a dark time. So it's like, stay close to your program of recovery, whatever that is. And because all the good things start to happen and you start to drift away from doing the work and things like that. And so I, made sure I stayed in it and was like really, really invested in my recovery. And, even to the point, and this could be a detriment too, but to the point of even making a living, so I was immersed in it, which again could be a good thing or a bad thing. But when I got diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's disease, one day I actually had the thought, I haven't had the thought of drinking in a long time, but I had the thought, well, if I drank, I wouldn't have to feel any of this. And it was actually even more so the physical things. And I was like, whoa, there it is. There's this thought almost 11 years into sobriety, or I guess at that time it wasn't, it was only 8 or 9 years into sobriety. I don't remember exactly where it was, somewhere that I felt like I was, well established, which is a danger thing as well. But yeah, I don't know that I would have been able to withstand it, because I would, the spiral of difficult emotions. And like I said, I was talking about earlier about, actually when I got the hospitalization last year, a friend of mine's son died of a fentanyl overdose, and I wound up flying to Las Vegas to be there and support him. And I think it was a tremendous amount of grief. And this was, in light of having just bought a house, getting diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And then all that comes with that, like I said, the fears of how I was going to be able to support my family and stuff. And then the grief of losing this young man and being there to support them, and the time difference and the jet lag and sleeping on a couch, because I didn't know how important things were to me, like rest and sleep and things like that. I mean, we talk about them, but I just didn't even realize. And that brought me to a place of an absolute mental break. And, so it's been a heck of a ride, and continues to be a ride for sure on a daily basis. And I need to honor these things now. It's my boundaries of being like, I need to monitor, when I'm doing too much, and that changes on a daily basis. And because my symptoms, I have good days and bad days, and I'm still very early on into it. And sometimes there's so many times when I'm like, oh, this is a bad day. This is the new normal. And then it's not. I have great days that are not like that. And so it's this weird thing That it's like, even if I have a really bad day, it doesn't mean that this is now how I exist. So it's tumultuous. It's very difficult. But I also feel very blessed, that when Jamie was talking before, thinking about the suffering that is happening inside and outside of these rooms, but the suffering that's happening for people, I feel so blessed that, I have a partner. There's people that are dealing with these issues and don't even know that they have Parkinson's, or they don't have the medical care. They don't, the money to go to a doctor or to get the tests or to get the medications, and they're dealing with there's just so much struggle and suffering in this world. Or like places in the world where we don't have the healthcare that we have, or places that are, not to make it too much anything, places that are getting destroyed by bombs where somebody has Parkinson's disease in that building. You know what I mean? Like it's just the amount of suffering that is happening, not just Parkinson's, but just in the world. It's very illuminating to me. Like, I'm so blessed to have a partner that is actually doing that with, like, if I were, and I'm 47 and still very healthy and things like that. But, to be 70 something and alone and not even know what's happening to you. Like there's people in the world like that right now. And, I hope that they find your podcast and find some solace.
Hey everyone, that was part 1 of our interview with Josh Ansley. Part 2 is coming soon. You don't want to miss it. A big thank you to Josh for sharing his story with us today and also creating our wonderful theme song. We appreciate you. And a big thank you to you, the podcast listener. Thank you for checking us out, and please share this with anyone you might think would want to listen or see it. We are available on YouTube and also in audio form on anywhere that you would get your podcasts. You can find us on socials at run4ben, and we look forward to hearing from you. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.